Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Cheap Seat Booking. I am Matt. Today, I have a single guest with me. We have Jason, a musician and a good friend of mine out of Washington State. Jason, how you doing this morning?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I was at Collision last night. My kids came with me, two of them at least, and then three buddies that I have been long-term wrestling fans with. I went to WrestleMania 3 times with one of them, and it was a great time. None of the three guys had ever seen AEW live. My girls had seen it a few times as they've been on the cruise, and it was a good show. I just quick rundown for those of you that have not seen Collision yet. Really pay attention to that Dynamite Kid Tommy Billington matchup. That was absolutely fantastic with Dax Harwood. I think it was match of the night. We got to see Will Ospreay live. He did a really good match with Lee Moriarty, and it kicked off hot with the Blackpool Combat Club and Top Flight. So it was a really fun night for most people involved, except for one gentleman. There's a certain wrestling fan that you just cannot trust to be around an alcohol and an opportunity. This guy decided to leap the guardrail, run past the announce desk with Tony Schiavone and Nigel McGuinness, and slide into the ring. He pulled this off. I believe it was after the Swerve Strickland segment against the Gates of Agony. I could be wrong on that one, but a little bit did get caught on TV. I had messages from former guests Josh and Alex asking me if that had just happened, and the security guards were on top of him. The ring announcer was in there. He took a couple of bruises and left in a headlock and a chicken wing. What do you think about fans like this, dude? Like, is there any excuse for this kind of nonsense to you?
No, well, just drunken, stupid behavior. Probably hanging out with his buddies. Probably they dared him to do it because he was so drunk. But you know, we were talking back when we used to watch wrestling. They wouldn't even call the authorities. They would just bring you to the back, and you would have a civilized conversation with
Mm-hmm.
one or a few of the wrestlers, and then you'll be thrown out the back door and probably taught a very valuable lesson to never do that again.
Yep. I mean, if you go back and you watch some of these old shows, a lot of these, early 80s, mid 80s territory promotions, when you see stuff like out of Calgary or Texas, there was no guardrail. You were on best behavior, and there was nothing but space and opportunity for you to serve yourself up for a semi-civil discussion with some larger gentlemen that may not have appreciated your haha. So these days you get arrested. It's considered criminal trespassing in many states and provinces, and honestly, he's probably getting off later than he would have. It's I don't agree with it. I think it's a stupid move just so you could say you got into a ring or haha, I got on TV. I mean, we saw that a few years back with, I think it was at Survivor Series when the Shield was down a guy. And so somebody hopped the guardrail and slid in behind them, and it looked to everybody like, oh, here's our surprise run in. And then people in the know are like, no, that's supposed to be Jericho. Who's this fucking idiot? And that ended up on, international TV. Yeah, it's just bad behavior. Speaking of bad behavior, actually, before we get into our main topic of the music, Ric Flair made the news again. Have you heard this?
I've seen the video.
You've seen the video. I have not seen the video yet. So for those of you that don't know, Ric Flair dropped a bunch of money at a pizza place and got it ejected. I've seen $1,500 is what he claims to have spent there, which would mean a lot of alcohol. Because it's Rick. I mean, I know he had these issues. And to me, when I see Ric Flair has a problem with a restaurant or got kicked out of a restaurant or a bar, I immediately go, God damn it, Rick, what did you do? I don't feel like in this day and age, it's really gonna be the problem of the restaurant. as Rick tends to claim. He's out there doing his nature boy thing in
He's
his
nature.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's been doing it for a year, and it is not appropriate behavior. If anybody'd seen Dark Side of the Ring Plane Ride from Hell, and they were talking about Rick's portion of that, none of the wrestlers were surprised. A lot of casual fans were surprised. No, no loyal fan, no regular fan was really surprised. Like, it's Rick being Rick, and it's not an excuse. It's shit behavior. When you heard it, what'd you think? Like, the news comes out, Ric Flair ejected from a restaurant.
Another day in the life of the nature boy, but that behavior hasn't aged well in 2024. I want to just start off by saying I think Ric Flair is the greatest wrestler of all time.
Mhm,
I have a ton of respect of what he did for wrestling, working the territories, going from town to town, flying to
mhm.
Japan, and then working back in the United States the next day. I mean, he's given his life to professional wrestling. So, but as far as that kind of behavior, I mean, the guy almost died, and you get your second lease at life, which very few people have that opportunity. And watching the video, which I believe was on TMZ, if you want to check it out, that
Excellent.
yeah, and he was obviously very inebriated. So it was really sad to see that he's not taking advantage of what God gave him, is a second chance at life. But when you're inebriated, you don't act the way you normally act, and that's kind of what it seemed. But for me, it's sad to see. I mean, he's mid 70s, late 70s, and
Mhm,
just live the rest of your life in hopefully some peace and happiness. I don't know what issues in the past he hasn't resolved with himself. He is the character of Ric Flair, unfortunately, all the time instead of being Richard Flair.
mhm.
And it's to me, it's sad to see. It's really sad to see.
Yeah, and, on top of all this as well, it's sort of come out that, at one of his recent medical appointments following up on these, like, severe health problems he had, I believe it was pre-COVID, um, so the 2018, 2019, whatever it was, um, on a follow-up, they discovered that part of his heart is actually dead. So he's got they call it a black portion of his heart where the muscle is just died. Um, yeah, he got a second chance on life, and for a while, I understand he was doing well, and he just sort of, I guess there's a mentality, and I've seen it with other people in my life where it's like, look, I realize I don't have forever to go, so I'm going to enjoy what time I have. But I mean, dude, you're 75 years old. This black spot on your heart seems to have come from a heart attack you suffered in your last match. Is the way they've traced it back. Like, slow down and enjoy the time you got. He's got 3 kids left. He's got grandkids left. He does have people that care about him. He's widely respected. He has fans everywhere. But the second I see Ric Flair banned from a restaurant, I instantly go to, "Damn it, dude, you can't do this." He His grandkids are gonna have to one day look at his antics and
Yeah,
say, "Yeah, Ric
exactly.
Flair with my granddad
Yeah.
for," and it's a shame. Nobody lives forever, but I mean, dude, come on. Give yourself a fighting chance at least. Anywho, so our main topic, Jason, behind you, you got a bunch of guitars. So give me a quick rundown of your music resume, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, it's I played bass for probably about 12, 14 years or so. I
Mhm,
just started, well, I used to play piano when I was younger, so reading music, playing piano, playing keyboards. This is back in like the late 70s, early 80s. Actually late 70s I started playing piano. And I stopped playing music for a while. But I wanted to do something, and so I picked up the bass, and I had a couple of lessons, and I just started kind of learning some songs on my own, and eventually joined. I played in a few different cover bands, mostly hard rock, classic rock. Yeah, so and I still play to this day. It's something, they say, like, rock and roll and wrestling are very similar. Like, you get that
Mhm.
rush playing live that you know people try to still continue to chase, but in their older years. But I'm kind of just content, and I really enjoy playing live. I mean, that's what it's all about. Having that musicianship with other players, getting the right note, and but sometimes you can be your worst critic. I'm definitely my worst critic if
Oh, yeah.
I screw up on a song, or I miss a note. I'm just like, oh, but you can't show when you're
Mhm.
playing live. But yeah, so it's just something it's just a hobby. I work full time, so if I get the opportunity to play, I just love doing it.
That's fantastic. So, and the reason we're covering this is, of course, because we want to talk about music and pro wrestling. It's been a thing for a long time. You and I go back far enough in our fandom that we remember where guys didn't have it. It was a rare thing to have that sort of big entrance. The most music a lot of them would come out to is the cheers or the boos of the crowd. Um, Now you grew up in around New York. You were going to shows in the Garden. Do you
Mhm.
remember the first time you heard somebody come out to some music? Who was it?
Yeah, it was Sergeant Slaughter coming out to, and please forgive me because I should know the name of his da 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 da.
Oh, the Marine hymn.
Yeah, yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, the hymn of the Marines or the
Yes,
yeah.
first time I remember really hearing music. I just remember, like you said, nobody came out to music, and it was just the cheers or the boos, and um, so that hearing that music was definitely different, and it was really cool. And we kind of just touched about who was the actual first. I mean, that's who I remember as being the
Mhm.
first. I used to read, I used to collect the magazines back in the early '80s, and obviously I didn't know, who came out to what theme, or actually got to see them, but that was the first I remember.
Right. So I caught on a little after you. I sort of came in just prior to WrestleMania 1. Uh, I was still a little too young to have figured out that, oh wait, I this is on TV every week. But if I found it or I was in the video store with my parents and be like, ooh, wrestling. We were lucky enough in my household that because of my dad's job, we were early adopters of home video and early adopters of getting a membership at the video store. Uh, yeah, it's like, okay, the kids will get their videotape, we'll get our videotape. There'll be like a half hour He-Man thing, and they'll be excited. Like, no, I'm coming home with 3 hours of wrestling. And it was it was right as sort of everybody was getting into it. And, a few things like the Iron Sheik didn't really have any music back then. I don't think I ever heard Andre the Giant come out to music. And some of it was not good, to say the least. I mean, I remember seeing the U.S. Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda, recent WWE Hall of Famers, coming out to Real American by Rick Derringer, which of course was then moved over to Hulk Hogan, who was using Eye of the Tiger. Um, so licensing music, or in the case of ECW, forgetting to license music, has been around for quite a while. Um, and then I guess as the licensing fees went up, or they were told, no, no, you have to pay us to use this, sir, uh, it started becoming more and more in-house. And that is where, we got some real classic riffs, and some not so good ones. I was watching a video the other day, and it really had a bookend of what is possible on both ends of the spectrum. It was a Demolition versus the Young Stallions. So Jim Powers and Paul Roma. Demolition came out, killer song. Here comes the axe. Here comes the smasher. I believe Rick Derringer's got writing credits on that as well. The Young Stallions came out, and it sounded like a first grader trying to sound cool, writing a song um, about girls in cars, and just the most generic guitar riff underneath it. Oh, and if you had your druthers, do you think using a licensed song is worth paying for it, or would you rather see guys come out to something that was written specifically for them? What do you think works a little bit better?
I think licensing a song or two it makes it a little more special than just, a generic or a song that's written for the wrestler.
Mhm.
Um, you know, like, we kind of talked about back in the early days, Junkyard Dog coming out to Another One Bites of Dust,
Mhm.
or Kerry Von Erich coming out to Tom Sawyer, or, was it Kevin that came out to Stranglehold?
Yeah, I think Kevin came out to Stranglehold, yes.
Yeah. But like, I'm not a Hogan fan. Always am a huge Roddy Piper fan. He's my all-time favorite. But one thing I will give to Hogan, that opening riff to Eye of the Tiger, man, the crowd just exploded. I mean, you knew like the electricity was like starting to build, and
Mhm.
then Hogan would come out, and it was just the place would just it was just huge pop. But I think keeping it special for a couple of wrestlers, licensing,
Mhm.
uh, gives it, like back in the day, some wrestlers didn't have music. Well, most wrestlers didn't have music, but you had a couple that did, so that made it a little more special for them. I think it kind of translates into today having a few licensed songs rather than generic or
Mhm.
wrestling related.
Yeah, I mean, Hogan went from, Survivor's Eye of the Tiger. He did Real American for 15 years. Got a comment from Alex. We'll bring that up. Then he went to WCW and had his WCW theme, his original theme was not great, but then he transitioned again. Evil Hogan had Voodoo Child by Hendrix, and that was rad. He's coming out playing the air guitar and he's leaning into it. I think as far as the licensing goes, I think the biggest name right now is got to be CM Punk rekindling In Living Color's career by bringing in Cult of Personality again. That seems to fit him quite well. I am not a Punk fan. Much like yourself, I consider myself a recovering Hulkamaniac because at some point in my life, I realized that whenever we were goofing around playing video games or mashing each other with the LJN dolls, I mean, Hulk Hogan was there, but the fight was over Bret Hart and the Dynamite Kid, and who got to get to those ones. And I realized at one point, it's like, wait, I'm not talking about the Hogan match. I'm talking about what Bret did, what Ricky Steamboat did, what the Bulldogs were doing, what Mr. Perfect match was going on. Um, Anyways, but and then Hulk Hogan comes back to the WWE and goes right back into Real American. The crowd goes insane when you get those. It's those first three chords, and unlike a lot of music today that starts with a soundbite of some sort, it's those first three chords. And I think another fine example of that is that guitar squeal for Bret Hart.
Hmm.
Like, the second you hear that, it's not him screaming, "I'm the excellence of execution," or, "I'm the best there is, best there was, best there ever will be." It's that shriek of the guitar, and you just know what's going on. Natty Neidhart taking care of it, sorta has a version alive now. Um, is there a song is there a wrestling theme that you just found yourself as you're noodling and playing around and jamming that has sort of popped out at any point?
Not really. I just really like the hard hitting, fast paced. Like, again, I'm not a huge Ultimate Warrior fan, but
Mhm.
like that dun da da that driving
Oh,
guitar,
yeah.
or even like Stone Cold, da 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 da, da, that heavy riff.
Yeah.
I just the crowd just eats it up, and you feel the electricity.
Yeah.
That's what I prefer.
Yeah, and that both of those examples between The Warrior and Austin, really bring to mind something Jim Johnston said. I believe it was in Beyond the Mat, um, but it might have been Wrestling with Shadows. At any rate, some documentary out there, um, he was talking about writing Vader's theme. Excuse me for a second. Um, and the reason Vader's theme was the way it was he was matching the beat to Vader's walking style, the way Vader paced to the ring. And you see that the Ultimate Warrior great because it's that dun dun, 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 and he's hauling ass to the ring, doing the most work he's going to do all night in that first 15 seconds. And with Austin, it's the same thing. It's Austin didn't run. Austin just stalked to the ring, and it's like, oh, it's my ass now. Like whoever's in that ring just seems to know it. Let's get to Alex's comment here. Best generic music that totally fit for them by happy accident, Goldberg. Yep. I had this discussion yesterday talking with the guys at wrestling. WCW did a very awful job with music. Absolutely awful. I mean, let's see the highlights of American Males. Wow. But when they hit on something, it hit and it stuck. Goldberg's music hit and stuck. That fit. It fits the image of the character, sort of so like that movie villain that's headed to the ring, even though he's the hero. It's got that sort of almost Darth Vader like march to it. And then the other one has to be the NWO Wolfpack song. That lives on today as one of the best things WCW ever did. But much like WCW lately, everything seems really generic. We'll get into some more things on the licensing in a few minutes, but a lot of the in-house music for both WWE and AEW just seems ridiculously generic to me. Are you picking up on the same thing there?
Absolutely. That hopefully you get that little soundbite that you'll be able to recognize who's
Mhm.
coming out, but it just seems so, like you said, generic and bland. Like, you know, Honky Tonk Man.
Mhm.
You know, to me, I love the. It's corny, but it's a great song. But like, you knew who he was. The song talked about him, described kind of who he was. Even like, as you brought up American Males, as corny as
Yeah.
that's probably the corniest, but kind of like talked at least about them, who they were. But like today, it just seems so like bland that it's
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Jim Johnson, I think his absence from WWE as far as the music goes is really being felt, and I don't think people are actually putting their finger on the fact that WWE had this guy in-house. It was him and, Jimmy Hart for years doing all of our favorites, all of our most recognizable. I mean, Jimmy Hart did Shawn Michaels' theme, and it wasn't the best theme, but it fit Shawn perfectly, right? Jim.
it talked about him. It talked about his character,
Mhm.
who he is.
Yeah, and it really did. It told you just enough of a story without sounding like a first grader writing the cool song. Um, but you got that, "Oh, Sean," at the beginning, and that was probably one of the first ones to really have that extra soundbite that I can recall. But I mean, you mentioned the Honky Tonk Man, but yeah, that was just a cool little Elvis deal. It told the whole story of what's going on with this guy. Um, it I think Sean obviously had a much better career than Honky Tonk did to a degree, although it looked for a while there that he was going out on a bad note. But it identifies them. I couldn't pull Austin Theory's theme song out without hearing A Town Down,
Mm.
which to me sounds like our SkyTrain telling me I'm about to get off at the stadium station. Um, it's a public transit deal. Um, Alex chiming in with another excellent comment here. Lashley and Sky had the same song for like a year. Yeah, super similar. I like EO's because it's unique to the point where nobody's really using that heavy drum and bass thing going on. So when you really got that thumping drum bass, it's like, oh, this is EO. And that's one of the few modern songs that I'm finding easily recognizable that don't start out with something. Um, the other thing that goes on is once in a while you get a band that's willing to write for you and do something unique. And we see a couple of them. We have Downstate has done music for Cody Rhodes, and that has followed from one company to another. And then go in the other direction. Adam Copeland's theme was written for him by the band whose I've just completely blanked on their name.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, at any rate, Adam, it's like, well, how did you get your music? You brought the same music with you to AEW. How'd you do that? Nobody expected. Thank you, Alex. Alter Bridge wrote that for Adam Copeland, and he's like, yeah, no, I can take it with me because it's mine. They wrote it for me. It's in my deal. When people leave WWE with the same music, everybody's like, whoa, how'd that happen? Whereas if they show up, it's like, oh yeah, they just opened the wallet and paid for it somewhere. I don't know. Is there something to it on the musician side, writing a song for a specific wrestler that you're going to have played on TV once a week for years? How does that sort of land in that realm of, you've been playing music for a while, live band on stage, and now you have, oh, this is going. What do you think that's like?
As far as emotion,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, how cool is that? That your music is playing and the wrestler comes out and huge pop and the people go nuts and they sing along to your song that you wrote for a wrestler and they know the
Mhm.
words, and that's an awesome feeling. And then just to add to that, Motorhead, you
Yeah. Oh,
know,
yeah.
writing the game and talk about a song that describes a wrestler. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
that's like a perfect, and the hard hitting, the again, the guitar and the heavy riff, and just
Yeah.
perfect song for him.
I mean, to steal a thing from The Rock,
Yeah,
I got goosebumps. Yeah, like the first time I heard the game, like Triple H used something. Uh,
generic.
it was like the Chris Warren band. It was the same guys that did the DX theme, but
Oh,
he did it
yeah,
with that irritating screech at the beginning. And the
yeah,
first time Triple H came out to Motorhead, I went, "That's fucking Lemmy. That's
yeah,
Lemmy. How did they get Lemmy?" And
yeah.
it was one of those things that had been so long since they had a big name band doing wrestling themes that I couldn't compute it. Like the DX, the Chris Warren band, it sounds a lot like Rage Against the Machine. It's not, but it sounds a lot like it. So having a sound alike didn't surprise me, but you can't mistake Lemmy's voice.
Yeah.
Um, I was in attendance at WrestleMania 17, and I remember between matches, we were, just chatting back and forth, and I'm in the middle of a conversation, and that first chord hit uh of the game, and I heard, "We are Motorhead and we're here to kick your ass." I lost my mind. Motorhead's here. I didn't If they announced it, I didn't find out about it at all. I'm like, I'm watching Motorhead, and my buddy's like, what happened to him? What just happened? And I'm like, it's Motorhead and Motorhead. And that started a bit of a trend. There was the next year, Drowning Pool and Saliva played at WrestleMania 18, and Limp Bizkit. Well, Fred Durst brought The Undertaker down at 19.
Yeah.
Um,
But American
Alex
Badass by Kid Rock.
Kid Rock.
That was good.
I was at the Vancouver show for that one as well. We had day of tickets, production kills, so we were sitting behind the stage and off to the right a little bit, so we could see the ring and we could see the guys walking out of Gorilla and back to the locker room. I didn't see a lick of Kid Rock except for when he walked halfway down the stage in the middle of the song.
Hmm.
But I mean, that was also a big get because Kid Rock at the time, riding high. He was coming right off of that uh, Only God Knows Why album, and the History of Rock had American Badass on it. I mean, for guys like Kid Rock, Limp Bizkit, those crowds are average. It's a sold out stadium. If nothing else, probably a little bit smaller because you don't generally have a giant clear spot in the middle of the floor when they're playing. But for a band like Drowning Pool or Saliva, I mean, even Motorhead, they've done festivals, but I don't think Motorhead had, on their own sold 69,000 seats.
Mm-mm.
What do you think that sort of mentality of you want us to come play live sort of sits with these guys that sort of had the licensing deal or have written the song, like Alter Bridge or
I mean, again, it's an awesome feeling playing live, and that again, that crowd going crazy when that wrestler comes out. I mean,
Mhm.
music and wrestling are just so synonymous. I mean, it's just a perfect marriage of emotion, um, and that electricity, um, fans going crazy. I mean, it's just a feeling that unless you've experienced it, you don't really understand it. I mean, I've done it on a much, much, much smaller scale when people are dancing to a cover song and singing along. It's such a great feeling, even though I have nothing to do with the song. I'm just covering, but on a whole nother level, when you're writing a song and the time you put in of getting the lyrics and getting the music and getting that song together and releasing it, and that then it becomes the wrestler's theme, and the crowd goes crazy. The crowd knows the words. They sing along. It's like giving birth to a child, basically,
Oh,
for a man.
absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
um, but it's got to be like an honor. Like if I was a band and WWE called me and say, hey, you want to play so and
Mhm.
so's theme. I think Rhea Ripley just might have been the last one to have a band play her out to
Yeah.
WrestleMania. I mean that it just adds so much to it. It's a whole nother level.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta admit, like, a band like Motionless in White, doing Rhea Ripley's theme song at last year's WrestleMania. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I gotta imagine it's like, yes, we will absolutely come and play in front of 70,000 people. Um, it I can't imagine a bigger thing. Um, sorry, it's a small glitch on the other screen here. I it's gotta feel just like such a rush of this is what it could be one day. This is it might be the high point, like, some of these bands might go down the road, "What's the biggest crowd you ever played in front of?" "Oh, 70,000 people." "What?" "Oh, yeah, I got to play WrestleMania."
Right, right.
Right?
It's good on a resume.
Yeah, and then you have then there are the guys that kind of do music as well, and I'm thinking specifically of a couple of AEW guys, Swerve Strickland and Chris Jericho. Swerve, I believe on the last pay-per-view, he came out singing his own theme song with his partner. Um, and then at All In, Chris Jericho sang himself to the ring. And that's gotta be a hell of a rush to go, I get to do both of these things today.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
and it's like, you know what? And my bandmates get to come and do this. Now I know Fozzie's played a couple of shows, um, bringing Chris down to the ring, including in WWE way back in the day, which was pretty cool. Speaking of that, do you remember the short period of time where Chris had some other band, and I can't remember who it was, do his theme music for a short-lived period of time around 2002? And yeah, it was really short-lived and it was weird because I remember seeing it and it's just sort of popped into my head right in sort of late 2002. He had switched his theme song from the classic Break the Walls Down, and it was some other band doing it for him. And it's like, but he plays in his own band. Why aren't they doing that? That's weird. Um,
Well, I mean, for people that probably don't know, I mean, I believe wasn't it was a cover band originally. It was called Fozzy Osbourne, if memory
yes,
serves correctly, and they
you
just
are
played
correct.
covers. And I guess it just kind of went in the way of them starting to do originals, starting to do really small tours in Europe, like riding
Mhm.
around in a van all together. And I'm not the biggest fan of Fozzy, but I got to give him props to what that band has become from a cover band to a
Oh,
legitimate,
yeah.
band.
Yeah, it was a very Spinal Tap thing. Everybody had different stage personas. I mean, Chris was Moongoose McQueen, and they
Mhm.
were all convinced they were like some sort of Spinal Tap thing was the idea where they were like locked in a broom closet for 20 years or something like that, or a fallout shelter, and they came out and all these songs they had written were stolen by other artists. And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, that's funny. So it was a comedy side project because Stuck Mojo was still going with Rich Ward. And Chris was obviously still really busy with WWE at the time because he was doing that full load schedule. It's and like big credit for them for going. I know they've gone through some member changes over the years, but I mean, for the most part, it's been sort of Rich and Chris and PJ and Billy, and they've just recently, I guess, a couple years ago now, replaced the drummer because it's been a couple of cruises since Frank. And they go hard for because you got to remember like these guys are in their 50s at this point.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, this is 25 years of being able to keep this band together, and that's a pretty hell of an accomplishment. That's
Yeah, tremendous. And again, respect and props for that. Even though I'm not a big fan, I definitely recognize that's, 25 years. I mean, how many bands last that long?
yeah,
Uh,
right.
and they've never really hit that mainstream. Probably touched a little bit with a song here or two,
Hmm.
but not really a mainstream band. More of still, I would say, like more of like a cult kind of opening band for a bigger
Hmm.
band. If you ever see them live, but again, kudos to them, man. Good for
Yeah,
them.
I mean, and they've had some big opening gigs, as you said. I mean, they've opened for Iron Maiden, they've
Iron
opened for
Maiden,
Metallica,
yeah.
and that's huge because I mean that's aside from playing Wembley, singing Chris to the Ring or playing Chris to the Ring, those are probably going to be their biggest crowds when they look back on it. I mean, they have a relatively captive audience that they have. Um, I don't want to say tricked into, but it's a built-in audience once a year for 4 days on the Jericho cruise because everybody's like, "Well, we're here. It's Fozzy, it's Chris. Let's do this." Even though I think Guardians of the Galaxy blows them, or Guardians of the Jukebox blows them off the stage every year. Um, that's just me. Um,
They use, they sound absolutely great, and there's a reason why. And
mhm,
I'm not gonna say anything too bad, but playing in a like I said, I play in a cover band. I don't write my own music. It's
mhm,
just a hobby, just for fun. But I know how difficult it is to try and get a song to sound like the record.
mhm.
They steal. I mean, they're almost playing to track. They're
Yeah,
basically everything. It just seems almost like karaoke-ish to me. And
it
again,
can
I
be.
mean, but what does it matter? Because everybody loves them. Everybody goes crazy for them. So does it matter? Does it not matter? I mean, the big thing today in rock and roll music is lip syncing.
Mhm,
Nikki Sixx accusing him not playing bass, or Paul Stanley not singing his songs because they can't hit those notes anymore. So again, you know, being playing music for me, I recognize that, and I have a different opinion than probably most people do.
mhm.
But yeah, I did want to touch upon something.
Absolutely.
So WWE using musicians to kind of promote the wrestler's song and playing them at WrestleMania. How about when Kiss played WCW? You want to
Oh
talk about a
god,
dud,
yeah.
but it's almost opposite in reverse because they played Nobody Gave a Shit, and then out comes
Yeah,
the Demon, which was who
that was
cares?
a fart in church. Yeah, that
Art in
was
church, exactly. It's just so funny that it was just the total opposite of what WWE knows and does with musicians and wrestlers, and WCW just did the exact opposite,
yeah.
and man, it did not work.
Yeah, and then, they had WC you mentioned that because WCW also used Megadeth for a little while for a Goldberg theme, and, I heard Dave Mustaine talking about that album, he's like, "Oh, that album was hot garbage, that was just awful, they paid us a lot of money to do this song, we wanted to be on the Universal Soldier soundtrack." It's like Mustaine was just like, I don't even know why we did it." And they had the good sense not to buy in and go play. But yeah, Kiss playing a WCW show, that's the exact opposite of Rev Theory coming out and and doing WrestleMania. Kiss is now like, we haven't played in front of this few people since we noodled around the backyard and the neighbors stuck their head over the fence. I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, that and talk about dropping the ball on that when you had Kiss, guys.
Yeah.
You had Kiss.
Yep.
Granted, they also had a lot of other problems behind the scenes and with corporate at the time because WCW was on the slide. But wow, that was. I mean, I'm not a huge Kiss fan, but that is a drop in the ball. Alex, bring it up. ICP and WCW. ICP was everywhere.
Sorry.
ICP,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, they WCW. Um, I hate to say it but it was funny, but Shaggy Two Dope sliding off the bus and Mike Awesome realizing it was happening and trying to catch him, even though he just power bombed him on the bus. Just like complete broke characters like, oh shit, bud. Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, ICP musicians, better musicians than wrestlers by far. But they've done a lot in the wrestling space. You're probably not a rap guy, let alone ICP guy. That
I will say this.
yep,
No, I do like old school rap. Like again, I grew
mhm,
up in the 80s and growing up in New York, that's kind of where hip hop was born, as far
yep,
as like LL and Run DMC. I mean, I do like that music as far as like newer hip hop and rap, not so much. But somebody turned me on. I think it's called the Great Malenko. Is that the
yep,
name of their?
yep,
I think that's a great album. And as far as them translating into wrestling, I mean, they're characters. I mean,
mhm,
it was almost like a perfect marriage, and they're entertaining as hell. I used to listen to Howard Stern back in the day, and they're great interviews. I mean, they're so I knew who they were. Wasn't really familiar with their music, but I heard that album. I thought it was
mhm,
really good. I heard a couple more albums, and then I'm like, nah, it's not so good. I like that Great Malenko. That's about
mhm,
it. But um, yeah, they're entertaining as hell. And yeah, they've done a bunch of what is it, Gathering of the Juggalos, and
yep.
doing wrestling shows. And I used to read about that as well. So props to them too. I mean, look at their career.
Yeah, I mean and when you talk about the gathering, it's the music festival and they got wrestling on there, and it's like, oh, okay, it's just they got some wrestlers in. No, they get big name guys in for that. Jeff Jarrett's been there, Terry Funk's been there, half the
Scott
ECW
Hall.
roster's been there.
Yeah.
Even up to and including a friend of the show, Cheeseburger, has been there. And they bring in, they put the money into it to put on the best wrestling show with it possible. I've never been to Gathering. I've heard some stories that make me go, "Yeah, I'm good not going to the Gathering." Um, but I mean, that was a hell of an intro. You mentioned Run DMC. They were early adopters of pro wrestling too. I mean, they WrestleMania 5, the WrestleMania rap,
Yeah,
right?
that
Like
that's
they were
yeah.
I mean,
That's our highlight.
it's not gonna end up between, Down with the King and It's Tricky on their greatest hits album by any stretch of the imagination, but they were one of those acts that came in early.
Yeah.
Like rest I mean, who that 35 years ago. Wow, that math is bad for my ego. Yeah, so there's all sorts of guys coming in and out. Um, how how important to you is it to get a theme song really close to the actual character? Like we mentioned already, the fact that certain stuff was written for the pace of the stride of the character. Vince McMahon's theme song was based for that strut as well, right? With the wacky waving arm flailing inflatable tube man arms of his. And um where do you think that really lies as far as how important is it as an identifying characteristic to have something that really fits?
I think if you have generic music coming out, that you're not going to get that crowd reaction. But if you have
Mhm.
that song that's the perfect marriage with the wrestler, I mean, the result speaks for itself. You want to get that investment from the audience, and getting them to sing along to their song. And there's just it's just, again, it's that next level rather than A Town Down and then
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as that goes, where do you what do you think? Give me a list of some things that you think are just dead on perfect, maybe that we haven't talked about for that particular wrestler.
Yes, and I wanted to bring this up earlier, and thank you for reminding me. Mankind. Mankind, this psychotic character, comes out to this ominous song, or ominous music, I should say.
Mhm.
Like, and you're like, what is this guy? What is he about? Like, just the music kind of just, and then after the destruction, after he, puts the mandible claw on his opponent, and his opponent is destroyed, then you hear this almost like a Hannibal. I think they described it as Hannibal Lecter, if
Mhm.
memory serves correctly, almost like, I just enjoy just like annihilating my opponent, and now, almost like a classical piano song. To
Yes.
me, that was just wow, totally different and totally fits that character. That
Yeah.
wow. I mean, you want to talk about, I think that music really helped get Mankind to, help him get to that next level. I mean,
Mhm.
Mankind is a type of wrestler that I guess giving him shitty music probably wouldn't have mattered, but adding that next level of getting that wrestler over, man, to me, that was almost a stroke of genius.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first time anything like that had been attempted, where it was two completely different pieces of music. It was almost like a sort of like the score to a movie, as you know, the detective or the hero is in the creepiest, most disgusting, disturbing place ever in the dark with a flashlight as he's coming to the ring, and then it's like a lullaby afterwards, like the soothing. We're gonna okay, you've done what you need to do. Now you need to calm down, big boy. Like, the sun's getting awful low, big guy. You know what I mean? Sort of deal. I loved that. And it took me a little while to catch on to that. I'm like, oh, it like a few appearances. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I see what they're doing here. That was, and I don't think it's been really attempted since
Mhm.
either. I can't think of another example. Alex making another good point. You need to be able to close your eyes and see the character just by the music.
Yep.
That
Good
is
point.
super well done. I'm thinking of stuff, I mean, a lot of this stuff is generic rock, but and then we have some very specific character stuff. Kurt Angle's music, that sort of um,
That was the Patriots
athletic.
theme.
What's that?
That was the Patriots theme.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was perfect for Angle,
Oh, absolutely. And the
just like
Patriot,
Real American.
yeah,
Perfect for Hogan.
yeah, and Angle made it his own. You don't think of it as the Patriots theme anymore, because it
Mm.
it much like the US Express disbanding and Hogan getting that music, right? It's the same sort of deal. And it's, that those trumpets start, and immediately, like Pavlov's dog, you can be doing whatever else in the building. And he gets to that certain point, it's just, you suck.
Well,
You suck.
yeah, and like that was meant. I don't know. Maybe it was Edge that started
It
that.
was. Yeah.
And back then it was like, he's a heel, and then Angle would just get like, so mad you're saying you suck, and it was perfect with the music. The
Hmm.
"You Suck" chants was perfect with the music, and how it's funny, all those years later, it was almost like a badge of honor to hear "You
Hmm.
Suck" to his music. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, that perfect marriage of music and wrestling is just, it's almost like magic. I mean, we're both you and I are big fans of wrestling and music, and
Hmm.
it's so similar together that when it comes together and it's perfect, it's like magic.
Yeah. I mean, and Alex making another good point. Kane with the pyro blast that's
Yep.
coming out of nowhere, and then into his music, that menacing, again, I like using this term because there's just certain things that you hear. There's certain music, and they're coming. It's like, oh, it's your ass now, son.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Kane was that thing. That Kid Rock Raw that I was telling you about, where I had the weird seats. We were close enough to the stage that we started sweating. Like, we thought we had gone deaf when that hit.
Yeah.
And it was just the intense heat and the explosion, and then that music. And it's just like, oh God. And you hear that, you get that boom, and you hear that organ. It's like, that's Kane. you hear the gong and you hear the funeral dirge, and you know it's the Undertaker, right?
Yeah.
There,
I have to add this before I forget.
yeah.
The road the Road Warriors
Mm,
coming out to Iron Man,
mhm.
man. And again, this is probably not the first, but definitely one of the first, or third or fourth time that it, talking about entrance themes, because back in those days nobody really had. But man, you knew once that opening to Iron Man came out, you knew there was going to be some destruction,
Oh
and the
yeah,
Road Warriors just came out and just kicked fucking ass, and it
yeah,
was just, yeah, like the perfect marriage of Iron Man and the Road Warriors just fucking annihilating their opponents. Man, I
yeah.
mean, just
And
perfect.
with the marriage, the Road Warriors specifically, they did that Iron Man thing, and that was really consistent from near the start of their career. But what really made it stick was when they got away from looking like they were just on set at a scene of the Blue Oyster Bar and Police Academy to the spiked shoulder pads and everything else. Like it's like okay, yeah, but you get that that opening drag of that riff on Iron Man. You're like, oh yeah, and they did something. They had a benefit that not a lot of guys did. Because when we were talking about Kurt Angle, he'd come back and say, it was so good to hear my music again when I returned to WWE and hear them chant "You suck." I was near tears. I've heard him on his podcast say this when he got that, was able to use that music again. His TNA theme wasn't bad, but I mean, it wasn't great. It's not something TNA invested heavily in.
Mhm.
So he switched companies and his music didn't go as well. And that's happened to a lot of dudes. Um, However, the Road Warriors had
I was
really
going to
good
bring that
music at
up.
WWE, and it
That's
started with
almost
Hawks.
that's almost as synonymous as Iron Man. You hear
Yeah.
that, oh, water, and then that that heavy guitar, and talking about Angle. I think, if memory serves correctly, "Lunatic Fringe" is his favorite song,
Hmm.
Kurt Angle, and I think he wanted like that opening to "Lunatic Fringe" is almost the opening to his TNA music.
Yeah. You know what? I hadn't pieced that together yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember talking about that. I think the album was Vision Quest. It was about a wrestler.
Hmm.
It was back in the mid '80s, again, a long time ago. But and that was his favorite album to listen to, like when he worked out or when he was training for the. And "Lunatic Fringe" was his favorite song, so that's why they incorporated that beginning. But
Yeah.
his theme song wasn't bad. I liked it. It was kind of like focused. Like kind of like
Hmm.
driving, and it wasn't too bad. But yeah, Alex bringing up "What a Rush." I mean, again, the opening sound bites like whoa, again, there's going to be some fucking havoc coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's I think Jim Johnson did a really good job of making that happen for certain guys. Um, there was a while there in the early 2000s where if a guy stood in the ring and said, I challenge anybody in the back, you knew he was going to win or lose depending on who came out. If he was going to win, you heard, well, it's the big show. His show's going down. And that's the way it was. However,
Mhm.
if he was about to have his ass handed to him, it was Kane.
Right.
And that was the next, it was you throw that open challenge and then you know what it's I think the aside from the glass breaking, that attitude era you're about to get dealt with, kid, was the APA and their music.
Yes.
Like, oh
Very good. Good
fuck.
example.
It's just one of those things, and like it, and this helps a lot with the guys and their reactions. I don't think there's a lot of credit given to when guys react to certain stuff like that. I remember Shane McMahon was, I can't remember who he was sort of partnered up with, but he was causing some problems. And so you know how it is, like if somebody's causing problems and you need a little help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the APA. And I remember specifically one pay-per-view, he was standing there, he was getting into it, and the APA music hit, and just his face fell. Just like,
Hmm.
fuck. I mean, you saw it with, Triple H when Mankind had
Yes.
his, beat down, and then he ripped off the shirt. You're facing Cactus Jack now. any
Yep.
logical person be like, okay, cool, you changed your shirt. However,
Yep.
the selling of it and the
Mm.
selling of these musical moments, because that's what we hear is, it's not always the logical, fuck it, I'm just gonna run down. Don't bother hitting my music. They're not supposed to know I'm coming. You hit my music, I've clearly been standing back here waiting for my cue. And I would prefer a lot of times recently if they would just skip it, because some guys forget that they have business to take care of. Looking at you, Jeff Hardy, on your AEW debut, that stood up the top of the ramp dancing while his brother got an ass cooking. It's
You bring up a really good point, and you know, we all understand what wrestling is,
mhm,
but like, you really want the believability as much as possible, and somebody coming in, and then you're playing somebody doing a run in, I should say,
mhm,
and then they're playing their theme music when it's supposed to be, not a surprise, but like it's so predictable now that it's just
mhm.
like, can you not play the music anymore and let it happen as natural as it should be if it was like a real situation? That
Yeah,
really, to me, it just takes away some of the believability that you're hoping to watch.
and that's really that the lack of believability is really what causes the, negative perception of pro wrestling. Is people's like, "Oh, yeah, missed by a mile. Yeah, he missed by a mile, but let me take you over here and show you the guy that did not miss by a mile."
Mm,
Um, I I believe I've said this on the program once already, uh, that those how close can you get without actually scrambling your brains? I recently had a long held belief destroyed by the man himself. I was speaking to Jerry Lynn on the last cruise about that match that he got kicked in the chest by Rob, fell off the top rope, and it looked like he had cracked his head open on the pavement. And Jerry's like, that was work, dude.
yeah.
It worked it, right? And the believability with the music is like, don't act like you just been sitting back there watching somebody get an ass whooping. I think the one really good example of how to use it properly is, I believe it was the Invasion. Austin showed up to the building, uh, got out of his truck with the tire iron and just beat the piss out of everybody going from the parking lot all the way to the ring. The believability factor there is, oh, they saw him coming. It's like, hit his music, hit his music. You have
Right.
time to get it queued up,
Right.
right? And I mean, maybe logically you might want to clear the fuck out of there if he's coming around with a tire iron, but at the same time, the soundboard is not at Gorilla all the time either. That's you see the soundboard set up, it's off to the side, usually by the stage.
Mhm.
Um, One last thing, recent trend in music, and I credit us doing it. Um, Sing along time with the theme music has become super popular. Randy Orton, who one of those themes, love Randy Orton's theme. I think it's perfect. He got Rev Theory to do it. People, Rev Theory fans don't really know it exists. I've showed it, and there's like, oh, you want Rev Theory? Here, check this one out. And like, what is this on? What album is this on? It's like, WWE The Music Volume 7. um, he recently got to experience it in France, where he's got lyrics to his song. He's been using this song for like 15 years, and he finally got the sing along to it. And he was like, it was fucking cool.
Yeah.
I mean, Cody Rhodes has been getting that treatment lately. But honestly, the sing along with the theme music started on Jericho Cruise 2.
Yep.
You were there.
Yep.
I know Alex was there. That was a hell of a moment, because if you go back and you watch that moment, Chris was full heel.
Hmm.
He's the evil champion. He's popped John Moxley's eye out. John's running around with a patch on his eye. He's got his full faction of the inner circle. He's being just evil Chris, as evil Chris could be. His music hits, and granted, we had heard it a few times on the ship at that point already,
Hmm.
um, and for a couple of years being on the ship. And he's supposed to be evil, he's supposed to be mean, supposed to come out there and do his heel thing because we're on TV live from the cruise ship in the Bahamas. And he had this realization, and he's spoken about it, where I'm supposed to be the heel, but I'm walking out with the top belt in the company to theme music being sung by 3,000 people. They're on a cruise ship that has my face on the side of it.
Doesn't get better than that.
What? And like to make, well, it does, because let's not forget his dad, his last remaining parent, was in the audience as well.
True.
And
Yeah.
Chris is like, I am supposed to have this look on my face, but if you go back and watch it, it was kind of like watching an old Carol Burnett episode, and Harvey Korman is trying to deal with Tim Conway's nonsense, and just he can't handle it, and he's just trying his best not to crack up entirely. And from that point on, Chris comes out, it's Judas, and everybody's singing, and then that this trend is sort of picked up. How do you think that is really going? Is it overdone at this point? Are we killing it, or is it we're just knocking it out of the park?
If you go to a concert to see one of your favorite bands, are you going to sit there and kind of listen to it, or are you going to at least sing along to the chorus, or like some
Mhm.
whoas or ohs, or it's
Mhm.
just it's the same. It's so same, or it's similar, I should say, wrestling and music. The emotions, and the flamboyance and the characters, and it's just that emotion of coming out and people singing your theme song.
Mhm.
Like, you brought up Jericho, perfect example. Supposed to be a freaking scumbag heel, and
Mhm.
man, that smile from I'll never forget it. That smile from ear to ear, that look of like, wow, like he just could not believe it, and there was no way he could hide his emotion.
No.
And what again, wrestling is about moments. You're not going to remember all, like, the flips or the super kicks or whatever. You're going to remember the moments, and that was a moment of where, man, wrestling and music just like
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
if you don't want to say anything more after this podcast, I think that says it all right there, because, man, it's just, again, like, for those who haven't been on the Jericho cruise, I'm a huge music fan. I'm a huge wrestling fan, and nothing is better than going on that cruise, because it's the two things I'm the most passionate my
Mhm.
that I love the most, besides obviously family and things
Yeah.
like that. But man, it's just two worlds that are perfectly blended together.
Yeah, I mean, going back to, let's go back to the golden age, the early Hulk Hogan, early WrestleMania days. What was the show called? Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling.
I wasn't a
What
huge
was what was the theme running into WrestleMania 1 with Cyndi Lauper? The Rockin' Wrestling Connection, right?
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
always been there. Hip hop has really gotten in there as well. We've seen country music stars come in and out. Um, the Sawyer Brown was on WWF, and I think they did some WCW. WCW had a bunch of country guys come in and out. Toby Keith was almost partners and played on TNA shows.
Mhm.
I mean, it's all there. It really is, and it's such a wonderful diversity in the athletes, and their personality leans to the fact that we can do this,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's fantastic. We have a few comments here.
Before we get to the
Um,
comments, can I just add one thing?
yeah.
And we totally missed the mark on this. If it wasn't for the Rock and Wrestling Connection, with Cyndi Lauper coming in and Hogan defending her, and then Mr. T coming in and getting involved, and girls who just want to have fun, and Lou Albano
Mhm.
in the video, and Lou Albano, I made you, Cindy. You were nothing. You were just a broad from Queens. I'm your manager. That whole angle. If it
Mhm.
wasn't for that angle, and Hogan and Piper and all those different
Yep.
elements, would wrestling be where it is
I don't
today?
think
I
so.
mean, it's a good question. It probably would be, but man, that angle, rock and wrestling, that
I don't
blew
know. I
everything up.
mean, you got a solid point. That was a key. One of the big keys is, MTV was still in its infancy, and having one of their big stars, Cyndi Lauper, cross over like that to, Hulkamania in its infancy at the same time. it's one of those eternal questions. Like, what if Triple H hadn't been in trouble at King of the Ring '96?
Mhm.
Would Jake wouldn't have cut the promo on Austin. Austin wouldn't have cut it back and said Austin 316. Where
And
would that have landed us?
Piper and Hogan, they were on MTV.
Yeah.
That was like I believe MTV in its infancy, those were the biggest ratings it received. Was it the War to Settle the Score?
Yep.
That was its biggest ratings. And again, that rock and wrestling
Yep. You
perfect,
got two
perfect match.
audiences, and WrestleMania would not have been a success if you didn't want to see Piper get his ass kicked so badly.
Yep,
And, like, all of
exactly.
those things just came. It was just the absolute perfect blend. They
Mhm.
baked the perfect cookie for that one, and
Yep.
we ate it, and we have just kept going back for more. Friend of the show, Sarah, coming in with, it's also
Who's that?
branding in a lot of ways, getting the
Sarah
association.
Sarah who? Hi, Sarah. Love you,
I'll
Sarah.
yeah, we'll introduce you. I
Okay.
think you're gonna come up for a visit soon because 'cause we're not that far apart. It's just a border. Anyways, I'm in other ways, don't jump across illegally because you'll get dealt with the same way that the dude last night got dealt with, but we covered
Noted.
that. It's branding in a lot of ways, getting that exosion recognition from the Pavlovs fans. Absolutely. I mean, the biggest Pavlov's dog in music, it belongs to Neil Diamond. If you've ever and they did this, it was one of the final songs right before Iron Maiden took the stage in Vancouver, and I don't know if it's set up that way because some of it's engineered, specifically to get the crowd's attention before the band comes, but, I'm sitting in Rogers Arena in Vancouver, sold out, waiting for Maiden, and Sweet Caroline comes on, and it's that low murmur of the crowd. Everybody's talking and chatting back and forth, and it got to that one spot, and then everybody stopped like we were pre-programmed assassins and go ba ba ba, and
Mhm.
that's exactly it. Like, it's Kurt Angle has that. You
Mhm.
can't get to a point in Kurt Angle's theme song without going in mid conversation, "You suck," and just going back to your conversation. It's a reflex. It's like getting kicked in the shin, and you're
Well, and it's almost like your favorite band playing their biggest hit,
yep.
Like Kurt Angle's "You Suck" is like, AC/DC's "You Shook Me All Night
Yep.
Long." You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
And like,
go ahead.
you
Sorry.
made the point earlier, if you did singing along at a concert. I mean, Def Leppard and AC/DC, I've both seen live in their later years. They didn't need to sing. They could have taken the night off and just played because that crowd had it.
Mhm.
The crowd was all over it. We sang as much as they did for that entire night, probably more in some cases because they're like, I don't got to do shit. I'm just going, especially Brian Johnson, because his voice got that's. I'm sure he's all calloused up, but that's not an easy thing to sing. Alex making a really good point. Do you think Chris Jericho changed his theme song so he can't sing along to anything?
Absolutely.
Yes,
He
he
had to.
absolutely did.
You
Yep,
cannot, you come out to Judas, that's for a baby face.
yep,
The crowd's gonna sing, you switch to, something that no, they don't probably know as well. You have to change your music.
mhm,
Again, when a wrestler changes his gimmick or whatever, or some sort of character change, or you know he has to change his music. You need a
mhm,
whole new presentation for that character, or for that gimmick or that wrestler. I mean,
yep,
one thing I don't like, and I cannot bring up specific examples, but I remember like when wrestlers changed from good guy to bad guy, or change their, they keep the same excuse me, they keep the same music. It's like, why? Different presentation, different clothes,
mhm.
different music. It's just got to
Yeah,
do it.
I mean, some music, it's so attached to them. Like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels never really changed their music. It just was what it was. But I think a really good example of that is look at Randy Orton. He came in, he was, generic music number 13 from the file on the fourth hard drive in WWE headquarters. Hooked up with Evolution, was, coming out to another Motorhead song. Um, Split from Evolution, and he had a song called "Burnin' My Light," which was okay. It's kind of a throwback to the late '80s glam bands, and then he turned heel again, and that changed to the Rev Theory song that we all know and love. And I think that is perfect. Absolutely. If they are so in love with your theme song to the point where they're going to sing along with it, like we are for Chris. And the second I heard, because he went to Spotlight, another another song from Fozzy. So Chris is coming to the ring and getting paid to do it twice,
Right.
which is awesome.
Good for him.
You will absolutely. I mean, license your own music for your own theme song. Like, you got to pay the record company, you got to pay the band, and you're part of the band. So, why not go for it? It's changing that so that you take away what we love, so we'll hate you. That is the key. That's why so many of these guys end up being tweeners or in like a gray area of, well, I mean, he's working like a bad guy, but he's still doing all the same stuff he was doing as a good guy. I mean, you don't take something away, give us a reason to hate you. You took away Judas. You took away something we look forward to. Spotlight isn't as easy to sing along with. We'll figure it out eventually, but you got to pull that away. Take away the pretty manager. I mean, when Randy Orton did start that heel turn to start facing off with the Undertaker, what'd he do? RKO'd Stacy Keibler. Everybody's like, oh yeah, these two. God, pretty babies coming on this one. Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. Give Stacy something to do. We love Stacy. Stacy on TV. Stacy just got dropped. Now I'm not advocating doing that today.
No,
Because
not today.
I mean, it's a weird position because I think more women have the Mae Young mentality that are in the business today of, no, I'm just as tough as you are, big guy. So if you pull your punch, we're going to have a problem. But society wants that.
Sponsors would have a problem with that. I agree with that point. I think women, I'm not speaking for all women, but I think, like you said, they want women wrestling is just as equal as men's wrestling.
Mhm.
And why not? I mean, Tessa Blanchard won the
Oh,
TNA
yeah.
or Impact World Championship. I would like to see more of that crossover. I mean, Charlotte Flair, I think, could wrestle with anybody in
Mhm.
WWE. But I don't think the sponsors would really like to see a man
Yeah.
hitting a woman. So, it's kind of like a taboo thing. I mean, especially with
Oh, yeah.
all domestic violence. So I totally get why they shy away from it. But, it would be cool to see in wrestling. I mean, it is quote unquote a performance. So,
Yeah.
but I get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where we've come so far as a society in one aspect,
Hmm.
and it's now in conflict with another thing in society we've come further along with, which by that I mean the women's role on pro wrestling shows. I mean, I saw some banger matches last night from the women. We had a great tag team match featuring Rachel Ellering last night, who may or may not have actually got herself hurt. It's Well, here we go. It can't be hitting and fake at the same time, so it's controversial for a different time. Absolutely. Um, it it's the We have a paradox with it. I
Hmm.
mean, you go and listen to Bubba Ray Dudley talk about working with Mae Young. He was scared of that woman. And so he did exactly what Mae wanted to do at 70 some odd, 80 some odd years old. It's like, if you pull this, son, I am coming for you when I get backstage.
Hmm.
And Bubba's like, I am not fucking with this one.
Yep.
And that's Bubba. That's
Yep.
Bubba. He is not he's not built for show. He's built for go.
He's a
Uh,
very large man.
he is.
I
I
would
mean,
not mess with him.
yeah, you got the opportunity to have photos with him last January, I believe. I saw him at the bar. He was kind of holding court, so I decided to just not insert myself into anything there. But yeah, it's not, and his body of work speaks for itself. It's one of those things where he- we're at a weird time where I thought Tessa Blanchard thing was amazing. I
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen, China entering the Royal Rumble. We saw Beth Phoenix entering the Royal Rumble. It's yeah,
Yeah, why not? I mean, why not do it? If you can do it, why not? I get why we can't, but maybe someday we'll, once we get out of this retro thinking that unfortunately I believe our society is thinking at this
mhm.
time, maybe we'll progress a little bit in that aspect. But yeah, I think times have changed, and why not? men and women. And I brought up a funny point. Well, not a funny point, but you went to Collision, and I said, stay away from Sky Blue because she had, where were they, in Edmonton
Yeah.
uh, last week, and somebody made a very derogatory statement towards her. And look at all the support that came to her defense,
Hmm.
men and women, which is huge progress in our society. Because when we were younger, it was what it was. Men
Yeah.
would
Yeah. We were not.
catcall women.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was right, but that's what it was.
Hmm.
Men would do that. But now it's not appropriate, and it's not the right thing to do. And good for society to coming to her defense for that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really no place to make somebody feel lesser about that. Yeah, and just because they happen to be female. It is one of those things. It's always going to be, to get back to the point, if you're a male wrestler strikes a female wrestler, that's automatically a heel move.
Hmm.
And you know what? In society, it absolutely should be. I've had the displeasure of dealing with some of people that have thought that it was okay, and it's no,
Hmm.
no, we're not doing that. I mean, we've had everybody's had these incidences, and it's like there's no place for it. However, in the context of pro wrestling, if Nia Jax wants to get in there and throw down with Jey Uso,
Why
I'm
not?
pretty sure they could both take it. Jay will probably get injured, but it's it's just one of the there's a consent to it. It's supposed to look like a fight, but there's absolute consent to it, no matter how crazy it gets, because
But but there's got to be a believability to it. And
it's
Nia
true.
Jax getting into a ring with a male wrestler is believability,
Hmm.
rather than Julia Hart getting into the ring with the Big Show. There's not
Yes.
believability in that. So I
Yeah.
think with that believability, you could probably get away with it. And I hope one day we will see it.
Yeah. I mean, I could easily see Rhea Ripley in her character getting into
Absolutely.
it with, just about anybody on that roster and making it believable. But yes, there is that
Absolutely.
believability factor. You don't want to see, Satnam Singh versus Sky Blue. That ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
Um, eh, Big Show is also the kindest, and I've never believe it. Yeah, Sarah is slowly learning wrestling, and the last cruise, hearing how Big Show grew up and a bunch of stuff there, she's got a soft spot for that man. Um, so yeah, so right now we'll sign off. We're almost an hour, 20 minutes. You got maybe a top 5 of your favorite theme songs of all time
Oof.
that just seem to work?
Again, I'll go back to what I said, as far as, that I grew up hard rock, heavy metal,
Hmm.
late 70s, early 80s. So, that's the kind of music that I'm attracted to. So off the top of my head, um, best music theme. I mean, Stone Cold has to be up there. I
Hmm.
mean, can we go with
Yeah,
other
whatever
songs?
you want. If they came
Yeah,
out
I
to
mean,
it, you go for it.
Iron Man coming in. Um,
Yeah.
that's two.
You can't go wrong with Sabbath.
No, I mean, come on. And for nostalgia and for the pop, I gotta go with Eye of the Tiger for
Mhm.
Hogan. I mean, seeing it and just experiencing it again. Not a Hogan fan, but I am personally, um, for me, Piper coming out to the bagpipes, just
Oh, yeah.
again, not a great song
And
per se, but again,
honestly, it's so unique. Like, how long was
yes,
it before anybody put bagpipes in their theme music again? I think Drew McIntyre has it now, but 30 years between theme songs with bagpipes in it?
yeah, yeah. And I don't, did I say Ultimate Warrior?
Nope, you hadn't yet.
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean,
Yeah.
perfect song for that character. Tough to beat.
Yeah, that was high octane for sure. Myself, I by Canadian law, I have to say Bret Hart, but I also agree with it because again, that guitar shriek at the beginning is just like sends again. I'm getting the bumps, right?
Hmm.
Um, I really love Randy Orton and the Undertaker's music. I got to go with Motorhead as well.
Mm.
And rounding it out, I mentioned them earlier, but that NWO Wolfpack theme, it's just a cool, slick little low key that's not, it's got the bass and it tells you exactly what they're all about.
Right.
And it's kind of like the Jake Roberts. It's just like they're not screaming at it, they're not
Hmm.
cussing you out. It's just this is how it's gonna be. It's that
Hmm.
low. Wolfpack is back, causing mass destruction.
And the
Can't you
great
see the
thing
bad
is,
boys of wrestling? Yep.
my choices and your choices, you can't go wrong with any of those.
No. Let's see here. So a couple from the comments. Gangrel's music, The
Ah,
Brood.
good one.
If anybody hasn't heard it, look up his current version of it. It's The Brood music underlaid over some hip hop lyrics. It is fantastic. Heard that for the first time at Boca Raton Championship Wrestling in January. And then Madman Fulton. Sarah really enjoyed the Boca Raton show when Madman Fulton came out. He has the Spice Girls wannabe overlaid on Drowning Pool.
That's
His
pretty
bodies,
cool.
and it was amazing. It was fantastic. So if anybody hasn't heard those two, I recommend looking them up. See if you can find it. Uh, both that Gangrel, I'm like, oh cool, he's got his actual licensed music still. Okay, well they're probably not licensing it, but then it had the lyrics over top. And I'm like, yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
and it's just banging and banging. Thank you, Jason, for joining me. Everybody out there, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers listening to us. I know at least one is. Sarah, thank you very much.
Happy Mother's Day, Sarah.
I thank you for joining us. We will be back in 2 weeks. I will decide on a subject. I can't decide between tag teams or talking about the NWO roster, but I will announce that. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Everybody enjoy Mother's Day and tell your mom you love them. While we talk about it real quick, did your mom ever take you to wrestling?
She took me to my first match because nobody else wanted to take me. Real quick, it was in Staten Island, New York. I believe
Mhm.
it was Wagner College or Wagner High School gymnasium, the basketball court. And I remember the main event was Jimmy Snuka versus Playboy Buddy Rose, and we had front row. And
Nice.
Snuka was my first favorite wrestler when I was younger, and man, I'll never forget it.
Yep. I
So
mean,
kudos to mom for that.
we did it as a family thing, and then another family we were tight with would come with us, and the two moms. I remember the first show we were at, the four kids were going nuts. The dads were like, okay, cool, this is a thing we're at. But the mom's attention really hit. Um, in the main event of our first show, it was Andre the Giant. And as we've discussed previously, that music hit and the Ultimate Warrior hit the ring, and the moms were like, oh, hello. And it took me years to realize, like, oh, mom wasn't dead yet. Okay, I see. Now I get what mom was into there. Okay, cool. So thank you to all the moms that have supported our wrestling fandom out there, took us to our first show, and gave us a little bit of minor trauma later in life. Happy Mother's Day, folks. We'll see you in 2 weeks on Cheap Seat Booking. Thank you once again, Jason, for joining me, and I will see you in about a month, buddy, live
Take
and in
care.
person. Take care.
Thank you.